Before I move on to the main part of the video, I wanted to show you these little things that I'd made here to hold up the mirror. And these are just some pieces of 2x4 that I'm using to hold the main part of the mirror, because I wanted to be able to hang up my necklaces. I'm trying to work on a jewellery drawer today, but I decided I didn't want to have my necklaces in there because they just get all bundled up and they work a lot better if they're hanging freely. So I got these tiny little knobs that you can get on eBay, which are for jewellery boxes or for dolls' houses, and then stuck them onto the back of the mirror, and those little legs are so that the mirror can swing freely, but more about that later on. At the moment, I just want to organise the rest of my jewellery drawer. Things like my rings, my earrings, my sunglasses. I just want them to look nicely laid out, put together. I want to see what I have, and I have a few pieces of hessian and burlap that I want to use and just make the whole thing look neat and pretty. Practically everything in this project was stuff that I've been reusing. Back when we were redoing the downstairs bathroom and made that brass backsplash, it came with some melamine sheeting just to protect it from getting warped or bent, and I took that and I cut it into loads of thin little pieces like this. And the first thing I need to do is make some runners, because I want to have a drawer that's going to slide along the top so that I can easily access things like my sunglasses at the back, but then have rings at the front, and then on the top I want my earrings, since those are the pieces of jewellery that I wear the most, along with my necklaces. So it makes the most sense to have them closer to the top. Here's where I ran into my first problem. While I did get the angle right, it needed to be sanded down just a little bit along the edges, and also because this was a second hand buy, it still had the little plaque on the side, and I needed to remove that to make sure that that piece of wood could slide forward and back comfortably. So I pulled that out, and I might reuse some of the smaller nails for something else, but the actual plaque itself I no longer need, so that can go, and now the top drawer is going to move around a lot more easily. Now onto my trusty glue gun, and then I'm going to be using the top of this scalp massager, which I never use, but I'm just going to saw off the top so that I can use it like a handle for the sliding drawer. And then for the pieces underneath, I'm going to be putting some glue gun down the sides and then smoothing it down with a spatula. Try not to get your fingers anywhere near this, because even though I've been using glue guns for years, I still manage to routinely burn myself quite well, as you'll see later on in the video. For the sunglasses section of the drawer, I wanted something that had an interesting texture. I've got a few of those different cloths that I showed at the beginning of the video, but some of them have got a much finer weave, and I wanted something that had a thick weave like this, just because it would make for a more interesting contrast against the sunglasses. So I cut it down with just some normal fabric scissors, and then went over the edge with some pinking shears, just because this stuff tends to come apart very, very easily. And even though it was going to be glued down, it just looked neater if I went around the edges with pinking shears.
No. Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Honestly, at that point I was so frustrated with how much I'd messed up and had to recut all those pieces that I'd glued together that I just left it for a day and then went back to it. At that point I had calmed down and I was able to concentrate, but despite that, this whole section here I ended up doing completely differently. I cut down some of those thin strips of wood into even smaller pieces, and this was the general shape that I was going to go for, but as you'll see later on, it didn't end up happening. But the little handle did end up staying, so at the very least I didn't mess that up. A while ago we had to replace our washing machine, and it came with this kind of spongy material, I guess, that just covered the whole thing, and I've been saving it for the last, I don't know, I think 8 months, so that I could make this ring holder, because I knew it would come in handy. And all you have to do is cut thin strips, then roll it up into a ball, and then, well, not a ball, a roll, and then get enough of those so that you can have a long row, and that's how you make the ring holder. This is just the spongy part which is going to go underneath, and then on top of it, because they do stick to each other a bit, you want to use fabric. Now I'm going to be sticking these on top of a piece of cardboard so that I can remove it easily. I could just stick this directly onto the drawer, but I like to have options in case what I need changes in the future. So I've put that cardboard underneath the rolls, and then on top of that I have some spare fabric that again I've been saving for 3 years, I think, and this is just going to curl around underneath. I'm going to be using some hairbands to go in between each slot just to hold it into place, and then I'm going to glue it down. And that's it, ring holder made. Now all I needed to do was put all the rings into place, figure out what I needed to make for the top drawer, and this is the part where I spent an absolutely heartbreaking amount of time just painting each of those strips of wood, making sure that they look nice and slotted together, and in the end it just didn't work. While that top lid would slide really nicely and I was very happy with how it looked at the time, after looking at it for a few hours I realised it just wasn't going to do what I needed. So I removed the whole thing, took all the pieces off, laid out the earrings so I had a rough idea of how much space I would need, and then I just left it till the day after to work on the project again. While I still had a few hours of daylight, I started to cannibalise the old ottoman that you've seen me do a few videos for, which was a bit heartbreaking, but it served its purpose for the time, and I was planning to reuse a lot of the materials anyway, especially those magnets. So while I still had a little bit of time, I cut together a few of the pieces of bamboo that we have in the garden and then made a few magnetic attachments to stick on the side so that it could clip together. I did have to pick off all the hot glue for this, and this was the main reason. I'd burnt myself so badly gluing everything together over the course of this day. I just wanted to use the kind of glue that you normally use to stick your shoes together if they start falling apart, but that really didn't work in the end. It just wasn't strong enough for the magnets, so I ended up having to use hot glue anyway. I have got plans to reuse a lot of the tacks that I used in the old ottoman, but for the moment what I wanted to use on the first little piece of bamboo is put 2 of them on the end so that they would stick to those magnets really easily. And the idea was that once they were stuck onto the bamboo, I could use that to hold my hoop earrings. I love my hoop earrings. I seem to it's one of those styles that I just constantly gravitate towards, so I wanted something that would hold them specifically. And then once that was done, I was just going to leave it for the day and then carry on working on it tomorrow. Now that I'm a little less sleep deprived and I did some last minute gardening last night to feel a little calmer, which is why my fingernails look a little bit interesting, I'm now going to move on to the second little earring holder. For this one I'm not going to use those tacks, instead I'm going to use some screws on either side, just because it makes it a lot easier to get the distance in between the bamboo and the magnets just right so that it slots in perfectly. The tacks were a tiny little bit too far away from the magnets, and because the magnets are so strong they hold up anyway, but the screws meant that I could get it a lot tighter. And in the long run I don't think this is going to be a permanent solution, just because the earrings do tend to get pulled towards the magnet, but it's something that I'm quite happy that I tried, and when I have a better idea then I'll change it. For the moment it works just fine. Going back to the earrings, so for those little watercolour, I guess, tablet holders that I had on the ottoman, and these originally held my necklaces, I pulled those off, cut them down into thinner pieces, and then started making little pieces of board so that I could make some holders for the earrings. The idea for this was very simple. I'm going to be using those watercolour holders as L brackets to hold up a piece of card, which is then going to be covered by a piece of fabric that is going to get glued down onto the drawer at an angle so that I can display all my earrings nicely. And this is how it looks once it's put up. And at this point it's just using my old trusty glue gun, putting some glue right along the very bottom and mainly using those little metal tabs just to hold it into place. And what I like about this is it's adjustable. Because that metal's quite thin and very bendy, it meant that there was quite a lot of leeway if I messed up or I didn't quite like the angle. And that very backboard, the first time I stuck it down it didn't work, it was just slightly twisted, so I was able to lift it up easily enough, take off all the old glue and then re-stick it down without a problem. Thankfully, after all that time it took to cut those really small pieces of wood, I was able to reuse them. I did have to cut them a little bit more and make them at an angle so that they fit with the earring holders nicely, but that wasn't too hard, and once it was done I just made a braid and I put that along the very bottom of the front earring holder just because I didn't like that there was a gap in between it. So again, a little bit of a glue gun, I stuck that on top, made sure that the edges got cut away, and then took that wood, glued that down, and then just glued everything together. And that's it, that drawer at least is done. Now the next thing I need to work on is just this mirror. I am going to save this for another day just because this video is long enough. But for the moment, this is what it looks like. It's just a block of 2x4 with a slot cut into it. I just need to start drawing out a pattern on it and slowly carving it away until it doesn't look like a piece of 2x4.